What up?
What's happening, man? How you doing, Doc?
Man, it's Sunday night, and that means it's Sunday night service.
Come on in the room.
Come on in the room. The room. Come
with
on
my
in.
G.
Come on in and say, man, that's one of the best runs you've ever done, bro.
What?
You've been practicing?
You ain't know.
You've been practicing? Jeff hit the falsetto. Hey.
Welcome to Religiously Incorrect. We are brought to you by Phillips Care Training.
Phillips Care Training.
They are the proud owners of High Street Fitness.
They did this.
277 High Street in Cortland.
Only ad they need.
They are running all kind of specials. Check them out at 330-984-7632. Ask for Big Mike, not our producer.
Not our Big Mike, the other Big Mike, the buff Mike.
That Mike ain't that buff.
That ain't buff. His beer belly Mike over here. Yeah. Ask for Buff Mike. How's everybody doing? Pastor Tatum.
Elder Carter.
Hey, y'all share. Do us a favor. Share this. All right. Like it. Hit your hearts. What did we learn last week? Hit angry faces on purpose.
Hit angry faces, yeah.
Be angry on purpose, because that's how Mark Zuckerberg has manipulated all of our lives by pushing things when we hate each other. So somebody put "Make America Great Again" or something like that in the comments, just to get our algorithms up. Y'all know what's happening.
Right.
What's going on with
Fatima, you? How are you?
Hey.
All right.
Sister Howard, good to see y'all. Come on in the room. Welcome to Sunday night service. Hey, we got to give a shout out to, I don't know if she's on tonight. They might still be out of town, but Lady Dela Cruz and our friend, Reverend Dr. Angel Dela Cruz, who turned 60 this week.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, I guess they went on a trip with the family and all. They had a couple posts up. So our good friend, the good doctor.
Okay.
We appreciate and love him, and happy birthday to you.
Definitely want to give a big shout out to Pastor Barnes, who was in my stead when I went on my little cruise.
Pastor Kent made it happen.
He's the man.
Somebody need to hear this. That's our favorite joke. My dad used to say all the time, somebody need to hear this. Yeah, he did good, man. You know, he filled the ball-headed slot real good, man. I mean, we have to get somebody bald to fill Joe's slot. It's kind of required.
There will be no black and yellow today.
There's a whole lot of black and yellow.
Y'all won that game on 12 technicalities. 12.
Well, y'all won against the JV team. Y'all literally barely beat the dude y'all cut.
Right. As long as we beat him, though.
Y'all did beat him.
As long as we beat him.
I did not want to know what it was going to look like if you didn't. You know what? And the funny thing is, I saw some Browns players go over and be gracious and da-da-da-da. He wouldn't have did that.
Oh, no. He'd have been doing all his little...
Yeah, up guns. Yeah, whatever he does. Yeah, all that stuff. Baker Mayfield. Well, we all got our wins in. I did genuinely almost have a heart attack with this game today.
Man,
I mean, it was.
Like, I ain't even a Pittsburgh fan, and I was tripping.
It was some kind of game. I mean, it was wild. I mean, that had Mike up.
I had to break out the hard stuff.
But Mike had to break out the hard stuff.
Mike's hard lemonade.
Right. Nah, he had to go deep. He had to go deep down in the cellar for that, because the Miller Lights wasn't making it happen. You know, the Bud Lights. No.
Let me preface this show with, I know a lot of y'all said y'all was going to come on and jump on when we talked about fathers in the ministry.
Oh, yeah, it's coming.
It's coming. We're going to do a whole show on it. We're not just going to open up a segment with it, but it is coming.
Yeah, we're exposing all the fake spiritual fathers out there. So type them in if you know them.
We're going to call it, That's Just My Baby Daddy.
That's just my baby daddy. Who that is? Man, I love it. Deadbeat, divine deadbeats. I love it. We're going to talk about it. But you know what? I mean, it's in the news. You know, I'm preparing my plane ticket.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I'm ready. I'm getting my vestments together. You know, and we have to get to the Queen's homegoing service.
Oh, hell.
Oh, this ain't a funeral. I'm going to go in there and say, this ain't a funeral.
This ain't a funeral.
This is a homegoing.
It's a homegoing.
Cue the shout music. I mean, the Queen is dead.
Who they going to have sing?
Leandra Johnson.
Leandra singing anything, won't she?
I bet you her funeral will be as long as Aretha's was, the Queen of Soul. Aretha's funeral was 7.5 hours. All right, so I want to hear y'all thoughts right quick. First few minutes, what your thoughts are about the Queen, and in particular, what does it mean to us? What does it mean to us? Because I've seen some pretty keep it real statements from formerly colonized nations, individuals who were once a part of the empire. Because if you don't know, and unfortunately, a lot of our history books don't teach it like we learned it. I mean, British Empire had like half the colored world, under subjugation. I'm talking India, African nations, some of the Caribbean. They were in competition with France and Spain to try to, take over the New World and whatnot. So a lot of our brothers and sisters of color around the world are not feeling all this adoration. No matter how much people love the queen or whatever, they view the monarchy and the queen as an extension of the brutality of their people, of their heritage. And to celebrate her and acknowledge her in a, gracious manner is to support what she stood for. Now, she personally didn't have slaves but she presided over it. That we know of.
Allegedly.
Nobody stepped forward yet. But I don't think it could be denied. And under her reign, obviously, everything was changing and a lot of people were gaining their independence. But I don't believe the empire gave away or gave back, any of the treasures, the monies. You can't make up for lost, labor, wealth, time, economic development, and all of that. And there's even like crowns, that has diamonds from Africa that were taken from these other places, that were very much, a part of their, their traditions and their elements. So how do you feel about that? Like, are we obligated out of human kindness to acknowledge people a certain way because that's the rest of the world's acknowledgement? Or do we still have the right to still have the same stance, living or dead, towards people that represent or have been a part of oppressive systems?
Well, I don't think we need to patronize her or put her up on this platform, the whole regime as it is. I mean, they've done some stuff that would turn our heads. I mean, it's just the same as, we ain't putting we still ain't nobody still trying to look at these Confederate flags, like, you know what I mean? Just because you ain't never, you wasn't around when General Lee was around, I still don't want to see a federal flag on your porch. If I see one on your porch, I ain't going to your house to trick or treat. I can tell you that much.
Right. Yeah. I'm gonna skip that house. The big White House that's like 100 yards off the street with a big lawn in front. And
by the way, I did see one of those bunk Biden flag.
Oh, you saw one of those?
Yeah, you was telling me about them the other day. I finally saw one.
Yeah, they're all over my ward, man. They on that. I mean, I have mixed feelings because, first of all, I feel like, as usual, there is a public pressure for people to feel and react a certain way, regardless of what their reality is. And someone can become a beloved figure, but that doesn't change the fact that they are part of an oppressive system. Absolutely. And that oppressive system made them the beloved figure. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, you can't skirt around that.
Right.
If you riding around in a car you stole from me, you know what I'm saying? Like, you riding around, you pass it down to your kids, and you pass it down to your kids. You still stole that car from me.
Absolutely.
I don't care if the grandchild's like, well, I didn't steal it, but I'm still driving by while your grandkids are walking.
Right.
So that's the way I feel like.
And you have to look at it. People always say you can't argue with success. No, I can argue with the way you obtain the success.
Right.
Maybe you have it, but if you got it off the black backs and off the sweat and off the blood of Blacks, Hispanics, Haitians, whatever, I do have a right to argue on how you obtained what you do have. And
I mean, to be clear, I mean, Great Britain continues to have massive racial problems. And I mean, look at what happened with Meghan Markle and the babies. And I mean, there were literally comments made, among the royal family about the dark babies and the distaste that they would have dark babies and those types of things. So you can't convince me that Charles and Queen Elizabeth and them were just in love with Black folk. I think we were more like still like a dark curiosity to them.
Right.
Like, like the exotic. Oh, that's certainly interesting. So I I struggle with that because I think that a part of, especially not just the British Empire, but I feel all over when it comes to history and the subjugation of African Americans in particular, that is distinct and brutal in the modern era, that we're going to be forced or expected to play kid gloves with people because of this shifting that's happening concerning the teaching of history. And there's a whitewashing like all over again. It's like as soon as stuff actually started making the history books, that's when this like new round of suppression of history, they call it CRT, they call it a little bit of everything. And now it's just becoming, well, don't say white folk ever did anything bad.
Right.
To black people. Like, don't say that, or you're saying that. And Scott has a good point. We don't want to dwell on it because we want to get off it. Says the British Empire didn't do anything that any other empire didn't do before them. History is history. Empires died long before this queen. I absolutely agree. I mean, all forms of human misery and different types of things actually did things to other people. I think what we call shadow slavery and the European subjugation of countries of color and nations of color, that stands, I think anybody who actually studies history sees that stands differently because it literally was based off of a theory of race that was created in order to justify that lesser peoples were almost deserving of enslavement. And on top of that, like they were almost created to be enslaved. Like they were lesser in mental capacity, lesser in value and worth. And that was actually a construct that's different than saying the Persian Empire or the Roman. I mean, it's just a different construct than Muslim nations taking each other captive after they might have warred with one another, African villages and warlords, even intersectional, so that's I think that's a different beast, Scott. And I think that's something that we have to reckon with and at least be honest about. And you can't ignore that. Yeah, those other empires that exist, I think they did. We have a lot to speak to it. But the British Empire just happened, as well as a few others, to extend into an era where everything could be laid bare through media, through modern history books. I mean, through, just like everything else is more exposed. And so, they carried it on this long and they carried it long enough for the whole world to see it for what it is. So yeah, they will be looked at a little bit worse than the empires of antiquity. Right. That's what they get for keeping it up for so long. I mean, I guess that's what I feel like. That's what you get for letting us go into the TV age. Like we're going to end up having news reports about you. And we'll probably, I use the word lightly, but we'll hate you more because we see it more.
Right. Exactly.
We will. We'll hate it more. What we didn't get to see the brutality of 1,000 years ago, but we did see this. Tatum, go ahead and give it to us. She's educating us. And it's long. I don't know if we'll be able to read all of it, but there's a difference between those African nations and Caribbean nations that were part of the Commonwealth. Good point. In the Caribbean, we were raised under a British system. However, we had our independence for decades. We will not disrespect the monarchy, but we won't go overboard in mourning. Powerful. I feel it.
Powerful.
That is powerful. And I appreciate all the perspectives.
Absolutely. And there's so many on there. We want to thank you all for chiming in. Maybe we'll hit this again sometime soon. But before
the memes have been hilarious though. Check out Black Twitter. Oh, and by the way, for anybody who thinks it's just a black-white thing, look up Irish Twitter.
And if you really,
Irish people, I mean, they're going in.
And if you really want more on it, go see what's his name, Pastor. He gave a whole prophecy on it. Azusa Street.
Carlton Pearson spoke on it.
He spoke on it.
Yeah. But he lost his mind, but he still got some prophetic gifts somewhere in there.
Before we get out of here, I want to give a big shout out to I want to say my girl, but maybe she is my girl, Serena Williams. As
she gonna be my girl if she ain't yours. Watch out, Shamika.
Serena, although she lost last week, her career is too important and too impactful to be to be limited to one loss. She done some great things for tennis. So big shout out to her.
Love it. Well, y'all know what time it is, y'all. It's time for the meme of the week.
Meme of the week. Meme of the week.
Welcome to Religiously Incorrect, ladies and gentlemen.
Meme of the week.
Thank you. Send us your memes of the week.
These are all jokes. We are just playing.
All right, what do we got? Saints be like, oh, just ignore him. He does this every Sunday. Yes, we do. Yes, we do. And there is a fallout saint.
Oh, there's a fallout. There's a run around the church.
There's a run around the church saint.
There's a speaking in tongues way too long saint.
Way too long. There's a get happy on the same song at the same time every week. Like you can just count at 11:27.
There's a mother who's going to say, go ahead, preach, pastor.
Go ahead, take your time. Bless them, Lord. Yeah, the ones that fall out. Yeah, there's always one. And you have to look around. I learned as a visiting minister and an organist, especially an organist, being an organist, if you played at a different church, you will think that the spirit's really moving because you're playing and something, and they'll be looking like, nah, this cat, he done it every week. He would fall out if the cat meowed. I mean, he would,
Right.
Some of them was like, he ain't even shouting, he having a seizure. He good.
I finally got a chance, and you probably seen it before, but I never saw it. I finally saw it yesterday on TikTok. G. Patterson was like, sir, sit down. You are not in a spare.
Oh, yes. At a whole convention.
Yes.
At a whole convention. You are a lie.
You are a lie.
And the truth is not in you.
I love it. You
are a false prophet. Sir said, take him out of here.
Take him out. Security, sir, stop talking. Stop talking. I got to remind you of something.
Yes. Yes.
You are the same person 7 years ago.
And he said that all the bishops were going to die.
Yeah. I loved it.
Yeah, that was good. That was a good one. Yeah, there's the habitual shouter. It's all, and again, that's why I keep saying the modern church. I love everything, but man, there's just some stuff you need. You need the every Sunday shouter. You don't get that in modern. And the lights be out, you can't see them anyway. I want to see them. Turn the lights on, blow the smoke out the church. I want to see folk run around and hit something while they're trying to shout. Trip over a floor monitor. I want to see that. I want to see that. Well, thank you. Send us your memes of the week to religiouslyincorrectpodcast@gmail.com. If we like it, if it makes us laugh. And by us, I mean Big Mike, then we might show it on here. Before we bring on our guests, we want to thank our sponsors from the Phillips family of businesses, Phillips Care Cleaning Service. They take care of everything from floor cleaning to house maintenance, move in, move out, wood cleaning, carpets, room carpet cleaning starts at $35 for basic steam clean. And they do a great job at just about everything concerning your home. So check out Phillips Care Cleaning Service at 330-219-7916. And while you're at it, the leaves are falling. The grass is still growing. Get that lawn together. Get your property straight with Phillips Care Lawn Services. Lawn care starting at $30. Apparently, inflation did not affect them because that was in the price for like a year and a half. Call my man Fernando at 330-219-7916 or look up Phillips Care at Phillips Care LLC on Facebook. Thank you for being a sponsor. If you'd like to be a sponsor, you can always reach out to us and we will expose your brand and your business to our millions of followers and our gazillions of viewers. What's happening, Big Mike?
Rest in peace, Ernie Schaefer.
Rest in peace, Ernie Schaefer, one of the hardest hitting boxers from right here in the Valley. You know, my previous homeowner was his brother.
Is that right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, the Schaefers, the people I bought my house from, wonderful people. So, you know, rest in peace, one of Mahoning Valley's own. All right. Who did he knock out? George Foreman? He jacked somebody up really bad.
Knocked out a couple cats.
Yeah, he knocked out quite a few. Larry Holmes, I think it was. All right, y'all. Well, Pastor Jeff is going to introduce our guest. Hey, do me a favor while he's doing this introduction. Like, share, tag somebody. I want to see some names pop up in the chat. Tag somebody and tell them you got to hear this.
Got to come on here.
Go ahead.
Listen, we are excited to have a friend or brother, one of the hardest working men in Youngstown right now.
Yes.
Pastor J.P. Robles, Jon Paul Robles. He has graduated. He graduated from YSU, went to a couple other theological seminaries. He is the husband of one wife. Has 2 children, and just a phenomenal pastor and doing a great work over there in Youngstown. He is working with, you'll see him everywhere. He's almost everywhere right now. So we are so proud he was able to take just a few seconds to come on here on Religiously Incorrect. Put your hands together. Give some hearts and some likes to our man, Pastor Robles. Come on, give it up for him.
What up?
Hey, good to be with you all. Thanks for having me.
Man, how you doing?
Doing all right. Doing all right. Yeah.
Have we gotten your name right?
That's it. You got
Robles?
it. That is it.
I was about to say Robles for the whole night.
You're
I'm
good.
gonna add an extra S to say Robles.
That's fine. That works. That works.
Because it just sounds more spiritual. No, I'm joking.
Yeah.
Hey, give us the short and long of yourself real quick. Let the people know who we talking to.
Who your people is.
Yeah, I like to begin by first always acknowledging my ancestors. So I'm the grandchild of migrant workers who moved from the south of the United States when a lot of Hispanics were moving north to work in the factories. So my grandparents were Mexican Americans who migrated north to get factory jobs. And from there, we moved from Indiana to Pennsylvania. And part of the story is actually racism played a role in the move. And I won't go into that, but not that it got better, but we moved from Indiana to Pennsylvania. And then I come from a lineage of ministers and ministry. And I was raised in a classical Pentecostal household. My dad's a pastor, still preaching, doing it for 50 something years. One of my worst fears growing up was bringing a friend to church. And we were talking about the unexpected or the expected. That's it. Right? Like, you know what's going to happen. And one of my fears was we always had the people who would give a word in tongues. And it was almost like clockwork. So that was one of my fears. And they do that every service, right? So I knew it was going to happen. But yeah, grew up in the Pentecostal church. Now I'm a priest in the Anglican tradition. So I tell people I span the gap between praise the Lord, everybody, and then the Lord be with you. And I live kind of in the middle there now. But I'm a part of a communion, the communion of Evangelical Episcopal churches. And a good way of describing it would be, they call it convergent, where we are sacramental, Pentecostal, evangelical, not evangelical in the sense of white evangelicals.
I was looking for that.
But evangelical in the sense that this is good news and
I got you.
that God's liberation is good news for all people. So I have a beautiful family, my two children I love. My son's learning how to play the bass right now. My daughter started her own party planning business. She can't even drive yet, so it's my name and number on her card. And then I'm married to the best person, Diana, who I love. I've been her best friend. She's been my best friend since we were kids, so wouldn't have it any other way. And
you guys got installed at the same time, right?
That's right. We were ordained. Into the priesthood. So we were ordained in the Pentecostal tradition years ago, but then into the priesthood in 2019.
Wow. That's amazing. I love how you talked about it being a convergent situation where you're bringing these traditions together. And I could just only imagine. I've seen and we've witnessed what it was like for Pentecostals to begin to adopt what you call high church traditions and certain sacrament elements, sort of just sort of raising the consciousness and the language and the protocol of so that Pentecostals, because as I know, being raised in a Pentecostal church that was sort of in a Assembly of God sort of background, and in the Black context of Black Pentecostalism, it almost feels like a guttural religion. So just definitely very I don't know how to call it, like just very baseline. Like it just doesn't come with any of that. It's the exact opposite of the Queen's funeral. It's like the exact opposite of Buckingham Palace. I mean, these are the people that were raised on dirt floors and, clapboard churches and things like that. And so I know what that's like. So that's a wild shift to the Anglican tradition. And I kind of want to talk about like, how was that? Our theme is, for everybody at home, it's a different world. Yeah, that's our theme, is it's a different world. And we're going to kind of push that in a few different contexts. Right. But I want to, I guess, talk about the interdenominational context. Wow, man. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. There's things going on here, Big Mike. But anyway, the interdenominational, what was it like and what prompted this journey? Because if do you consider yourself Mexican in heritage?
I do. The language was stripped from me because of the assimilation force of my grandparents wanted their children and their grandchildren to speak the language. I'm not judging them for that.
Right.
I think it was a method of survival. We could talk about that later, how
Right.
it was a form of violence, really, that happened to Latino people, Latina people. But yeah, it's a wild journey for sure. It absolutely.
I guess what I was asking was if Mexican Pentecostals or anything like Black Pentecostals like to leave or even shift from that context of faith is like leaving Jesus. I mean, and I wasn't even raised hardcore Pentecostal, but when I went to go be a Baptist minister and accept the call at a Baptist church, you would have thought I left Jesus and the Holy Ghost and everything behind. So tell us about that.
So Richard Rohr has a quote where he says, everybody should dig deep into their own tradition until they find the river that connects us all. And we forget. I think sometimes I feel like people know scripture so well, but they don't know the tradition that brought scripture to them. They know their form of church so well, but they don't know church history too well. And so when it's time to dig down deep and find the river that connects us all, for me, as a Pentecostal, that goes to Methodists. So if you look at like the Christian family tree, you go to the Methodist church and Wesley.
Yes.
He was an Anglican priest. And so early Pentecostals were actually highly sacramental. 1906, Day of Pentecost. See, there's that formation coming through.
Right, there it is.
Azusa Street, which you would think was the Day of Pentecost, the way they view it. But Azusa Street, and then you have these Methodists, kind of like an amalgam of people gathering around the altar.
Missions,
during the Lord's Supper. And back then, there wasn't a lot of Pentecostal scholarship, but there were journals. So when you read the journals of these early Pentecostals, you find out that they were sacramental. That's what kind of sent me in the route of curiosity, I could say. Began to look at early Pentecostals and how their faith was. That opened up some new things, some new insights for me. That's just me. So,
no, I like it. I mean, I've been in a similar journey. I was the one, I say this unashamedly and not arrogantly, but I think I was the first person in my church coming up, especially when I became a minister and then an elder and associate, that actually took the time to really explore our church doctrine. That's where I figured out, this is literally just it's just a copy and paste from Assembly of God doctrine, which is somewhat of a copy and paste of Church of God in Christ doctrine, but they just tend to have far more position papers on specific pieces of the doctrine where they actually explain it scripture by scripture and word for word, as opposed to just what you repeat on a card at my wife's coaching church, for instance, or what we had on a piece of paper that we never even really referred to. And I just became obsessed with what do we believe? Why do we believe it? What is it based on? Then, like you said, you start digging deep, you start finding out that actually comes from. So you're telling me how different we are from Baptists or how different we are from Methodists. And you're like, no, actually, we are just an amalgamation of those traditions. Then people just started doing what works best for them. And the funny joke that people say about non-denominational church is like, y'all just Baptists without the name.
That's right.
You're either Baptist or Pentecostal without the label. Because you're literally living within their hierarchy, their structures, their Episcopal, whatever it is they do. You just chose a way, but you didn't want to be connected to the actual structure.
Yeah.
Now through this conversion, where you came from and where you are now, you may not be Pentecostal anymore, but I've watched you and I've heard you several times. You still have the Pentecostal slang. You still have the so you didn't code switch, if you would.
Yeah.
See, I brought that in there.
Brought it in.
You didn't code switch, if you would. You didn't go there and try to be them. You went there still being yourself.
You're so right. I want to make sure that I say this. I still claim Pentecostalism, even if Pentecostals don't claim me.
All right.
So I don't let that be taken away from me. Still speak in tongues, still believe in the laying on of hands, the gifts of the Spirit, all the charisms like that hasn't left me. In fact, what's so wild about Pentecostals, I forget the scholar who said this, but one of the strangest but yet most accurate definitions of Pentecostals is that they're blood mystics. They plead the blood over everything.
Yeah. Yes.
One of the things that's wild to me is that I was raised in what's called memorialism. So it's like when we're at the Lord's table for the Lord's Supper communion, we don't think God's doing anything. We think we're doing something, but not so much that there's an ontological top-down reality happening here. And yet you ask any Pentecostal who was raised in classical Pentecostalism how they feel about mishandling the Lord's Supper.
Right.
And they'll tell you it can lead to death. So they'll go to Paul in Corinthians where he says, because you're mishandling it, some of you are sick, some of you are sleeping, you're dying. And so they had a fear of it. They believed it could bring death, but they didn't believe that it could bring life. So what happened for me was I began to wrestle with these things and really explore, early Christianity, and it changed my life forever.
I love that you believed it could bring death, which we were all warned about. I mean, you couldn't touch the table. You can't, don't you touch that table, boy. But we didn't believe it could bring life as far as that direct divine connection, because then we think, oh, you're being Catholic.
Yep, exactly.
Or you in that false doctrine now. You think the blood didn't turn into something and you a vampire. And, I love that. And since Pastor Jeff brought that word into the conversation, I love the idea. I don't love the idea. I love that the concept has been brought to the forefront of code switching, that we as a generation, we're very close in generation, and Jeff's, and we're all in the same generation. We're more cognizant of sort of the social gymnastics we have to do in the secular and religious worlds in order to fit in. And it's almost, I hate to say it, because in some ways, the media age, the social media age has almost worsened it, because our forms of worship seem even more ridiculous and unpolished and guttural once they're put under bright lights. And let's be honest. I mean, one of the most joked about forms of worship is Pentecostalism. We're the ones that are always putting up the shout videos and the funny stuff that happens and the craziness. That's become more of a meme than just about any other Christian tradition. I guess Anglican priests don't do too much funny stuff. I guess it's not.
In our community, they do.
But I mean, how do you feel? I do even believe it plays a part, and I'll touch on it in a second, even in what we think is a convergence, but I almost feel like it's a social pressure to diminish our cultural and spiritual fervor and passion in favor of a more mainstream, I almost call it pop worship, like an acceptable worship model that follows certain patterns. It's almost sitcomish at this point. And if you're more of a what do you call it when you're just doing the stuff off the fly? If you're more of like what do you call it? Like Saturday Night Live when you're doing not satire, when you like just get
off the head.
Off the top of your head. Oh man, the word is escaping me. But anyway, when you're literally, in that frame, that's almost seen as, unacceptable and lacking excellence, lacking polish. So how do you feel about the code switching that you have to do culturally? And naturally, spiritually comes into that.
So I think that's a great question. One of the things that we're always asking, and I should clarify this. So in our communion, it's the communion of evangelical Episcopal churches. Episcopal just means bishops. So we have bishops and their succession, apostolic succession. You could look at it like Jesus had a cold, sneezed on the disciples, sneezed on Clement, so on and so forth, right? Like it just works its way out. But one of the things that we talk about all the time is, can the liturgy be racist? And without a doubt, the answer to me is obvious. It can present a vision of maturity that looks very much, because it's whiteness. It can be. So when you look at these institutions, what do you see? Even if there's a person of color in a position of power, it's perfunctory. It's there so that they look diverse.
Right.
Meanwhile, the power is still held in that normative white culture. Right. And so I think that one of the things that I like about our communion is we stay Pentecostal, but we also know what it is to have high church moments. But it's a wild thing. I wish I could show clips and share it. Some of these churches that are convergent, I mean, they're full out Pentecostal services. I guess the difference would be they're sacramental. And we could talk about that later, but I want to get back to the code switching thing. Code switching to me does happen in church. And I think we're seeing it right now. And maybe we could talk about this. I think we're seeing it right now, especially among people who come from charismatic, Pentecostal. Those are the worlds that I know. So those worlds, what we're seeing is code switching. It's a strategy, isn't it? It's like, it's an attempt to change and adjust one style of behavior, one's expression in order to optimize how you're seen and how you're received. It's an effort to gain,
broaden your audience,
some kind of expediency added to ministry, I suppose.
Yeah, no, and I'm there with you, because that's literally, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that's almost an argument that is being made by some of our more contemporary ministers, worship groups, or whatever. Hey, if you want to reach the broadest audience, you have to do it like this. You don't want to alienate people. They don't understand. Literally, don't want to be too black. That sound doesn't resonate. And here's the crazy thing: we know that. We know that. We started off and have always lived in the minority reality. We were never the default. And as much as the last 50 years or so, especially, has brought what you'd call a mixture of integrated worship, it's almost always been exclusively Black or marginalized communities adapting the mainstream music, putting a little funk on it, putting a little stank on it, putting something to it. You're not hearing a large swath of white evangelical churches or dominant culture churches singing the traditional songs of the Black culture. Now, they might have reasons for it. And I actually heard from someone say, hey, I don't want to offend your culture. That feels like something I don't want to be accused
like appropriation
of cultural appropriation or mockery. But we do have a yearning, and who knows, when much as we talk about we'd like to see it, we probably would be offended and you'd end up on YouTube or Facebook if we did catch you trying to do an old school, Mahalia Jackson tune, like a white lady, a Becky trying to sing Mahalia Jackson.
They have it everywhere. We can't have nothing to ourselves.
We can't have nothing to ourselves. But then we celebrate when like the Japanese gospel choir sounds like us, or the white Pentecostals. And I hate to call them the white Pentecostals, but they're like the apostolics. There's an apostolic denomination, PWI. I forget what it's called.
United Pentecostals. Yep.
Yeah, the Pentecostals. And they literally, I mean, and we love it until we find out they're all Trumpers. But we love it. And that's the funny thing. For those of you that don't know, just about all the white folk that have church like Black people are not on your side when it comes to.
Can I add a note in here? That's because they're just fundamentalists who speak in tongues.
There it is. Yes. Yeah, that is correct.
Wow.
So Jeff, how do you feel, and how do you see that code switching at work in your side of things? Because you do things even with social activism, and sometimes I do get a little embarrassed when we're in mixed company and Black folk act too Black. You know what I mean? Like I can name a few names, but I won't.
I see it in so many different ways, because in some ways I feel like it's why does it have to be cold? Why can't it just be talking proper or just speaking?
Well, who determines what's proper?
That's where it gets. That's
almost what he said about the maturity thing with the liturgy. Like, who decided this is correct?
Right.
And the other thing is exotic.
Yeah.
We're the exotic. Right. And and then it gets really bad when you're talking about changing your hairstyle. I can't wear my dreads anymore,
right?
Or the way you dress, And I mean, I'm the first person to say, pull your pants up, stop acting. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you get more into like what do they call it? Respectability politics.
Absolutely.
Like be respectable, and it's seeped into the church. Right. I think respectability politics has seeped into the church, particularly among charismatic and culturally rich churches that like, hey, if you want to make it mainstream, don't be too much of you. Dampen that down a little bit, polish it up, sanitize it.
There you go.
Yeah.
Sanitize
but
it.
Some people will call sanitizing code switching. So where's the cutoff there?
Yeah, where's the cutoff? At what point are you like the Dave Chappelle and whiteface?
Yeah. I think one of the things that I like going with is Thurman's definition of it, which is a strategic loss of self-respect. It's a capitulation to the powerful in order to somehow gain something, but you lose your identity in the process, and you're willing to sacrifice it. You're willing to lay that down, sacrifice it in order to gain. I mean, if there wasn't a more, I don't know,
this is religiously incorrect. Go with it. This is religiously incorrect.
It's a colonialist approach to the faith. because its aim is acquisition, control, mastery, ownership. I'm running out of words, but I think that's why we see this happening. It's a strategic loss of self-respect.
Wow.
I love that.
I love it. I love it.
One of the quotes you used when you were at the Action, we had something you spoke there, but one of the quotes you used is one of the ones that I really love by forgive me if I don't say his name right, but it's Rabbi Herschel.
Yeah, Abraham Joshua.
Abraham, yeah, and it says that how does it go? Many are in a you have to go.
Society, some are guilty, all are responsible.
All are responsible.
Okay, say that again.
In a free society, some are guilty, but all are responsible.
Wow.
I want you to break that down for me. I want you to break that down for me, please.
It's a way of saying that we all are able, responsibility. We are all able to respond, and we ought to, and we should, and that's on us. That is our work in the world. So what we see happening a lot of times is just shoving the blame to the other. You see this kind of bifurcation of responsibility, and you see this dualistic mind, which is a small mind that wants to make the world of us and them, blame all the problems on them, make us look virtuous, that sort of thing. But Heschel comes along and he says, no, in a free society, all are responsible. So
I love that. How does that apply, do you think, to ministry in the church, and whether it's what we see as denominational abuses, structures that have been, suppressive and oppressive, and then cultural as well? How do you see that working in the church in a practical sense?
Oh my goodness. That's a good question. Well, I don't want to get into
the church sell some assets and send it to black folk. Should people that have historically benefited from the subjugation of other cultures, should they look for ways to repair?
Without a doubt. How can you call yourself a Christian without taking that approach? It's mind-boggling to me.
Yeah.
It's just absolutely insane. And I think that's happening right now, right? With historically white institutions. What we really see is just more white messianic visions that does nothing but recenter whiteness. But I think that idea that was in the past, thank God it's over, we're free of any responsibility, let's just keep moving forward. You know what? Let's hire someone of color, give them some kind of public office so that people can see them. And meanwhile, the culture stays rooted in whiteness. The power stays rooted in whiteness. I mean, it speaks to everything.
You said, and I'm just going to piggyback on what you were talking about right now. And this, you talked about redefining the tension, redefining of tension. You said the redistribution of tension is for white people of means to hear, listen, and be quiet, and feel the compulsion to say nothing, and then just act. Not that words do not matter, but in the end, only action can be the primary response. Yeah, I love that, because oftentimes they have words. They want to say something. They want to give us an apology without action. They want to, So talk about that for a minute.
That actually comes from Mark Laberton. He's a professor out in California, but I got to give him credit for that. That's his line. I like what Andrew Draper says. No one needs your wokeness. What we tend to see happening is a lot of people who think they're woke are actually just overly ambitious. And so they're recentering themselves again. And so Laberton comes along and he says the redistribution of tension is multifaceted. It means to hear, listen, be quiet, and then say nothing and just act. I think that's what we really need. If you have interest in making this world a healthier place, a more holistic place, a place of equity, equality, a place where we can celebrate beauty that doesn't look singular in its vision of maturity, then I do think it's going to require the difficult work of action. And I want to go back to this thought. A lot of times we think that Christianity, the action of Christianity, is just building. We're stuck in one direction. We think that the action of Christianity is to build, build, build. We forget the witness of Scripture that tells us to tear down, tear down, tear down.
Wow.
Right.
So what we ought to see is the dismantling of some of these institutions. They're in hospice care, and they know it. They have money out of wazoo, and they're wondering, how can we have a faithful witness in the city or in the culture or in the neighborhoods that we're located within? Well, I could tell you how. Shut it down.
Show me the money. That's it.
I mean, that sounds harsh. I'm not trying to.
Are you speaking my language, Doc? Keep preaching.
Okay. Because you have all these resources, and what you're doing is you're just extending the life, but it's a hospice care kind of life.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, there's people out there that could benefit, and you could restore and actually have action from your body or your institution that could do some reparative work in the world. But instead, you're just biding your time until you've run out of money, and then you're going to close your doors anyways.
Right.
Wow.
And that's a struggle I found myself in the center of. I've spoken several times, and I'm glad you mentioned that. It's almost like a token sandwich between your more conservative viewpoint that's more white evangelical. Like you said, the past is the past. Let's pursue reconciliation in a way that doesn't require anything of me. And then there's the more liberal, I'm white and woke side of I'm on your side. I'm almost speaking over you and for you. And I want you to know how much I feel your pain. Right. But again, like you said, both are somewhat ineffective, and both of them carry with them a hero complex that denies the sort of autonomy of the person or the peoples that they claim to want to help. And I could sit here and say names, having been in the Mahoning Valley now as an active, known minister for 15 years, especially in Warren, last 10 years as a pastor. And I was that young, dynamic, Black, outspoken, this, that. Everybody has invited me to lunch or breakfast. Right. Every white figure, from my Methodist brothers and sisters to my evangelical brothers and sisters, they've all invited me. What can I do? How can I come along? I love the language. How can I come alongside you? Yeah. I want to walk alongside you. And then I learned how to hone my answers, because the first few times I was just so glad to be invited to the table. I didn't realize I was on the menu. Right. I didn't realize I was, and even if they didn't intend it, these are not always nefarious purposes. Like, let me grab this young kid preacher and turn him into my puppet. No, they really do think they're doing. Right. But then when I learned to hone my message, I became a little bit more militant. I've even drawn back a little bit from the harshness of my language, but I stick to my guns on, hey, I don't have all the answers, but I'm moving in this direction. If you're not willing to move in this direction, I don't see how the conversation can proceed. As one evangelical pastor, very prominent in the city of Warren, once came to my office after the George Floyd situation and said he wanted to increase the racial mixture of his church, wanted to see a more integrated church, and even gave me a number like 5%, and I'd like to see it higher. And I said, I'll tell you what no other Black church pastor would tell you, because they're so nice. I tell you, I could care less if any Black families joined your church, because every Black family that joins your church is one less Black family that's going to one of our churches that are doing worship and witness right within the distressed areas where they're needed, especially, no disrespect to anyone in the socioeconomic strata, but those certain middle class, more stable ministry, families that are looking for the amenities and the extras you have to offer. We actually need them more. And the law of proportions that people always seem to miss out on is that one family to you is like losing 10 functions in my church.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Because of our population, like that only one family. Do you know what a difference if you have 1,000 members and only 15 Black families? Do you know what type of difference those 15 Black families would make in Black churches the community? Do you understand? Now, so I've had that tension, and it's frustrating because they all want to be your friend until you stick to your guns. Yep. You stick to your culture. You stick to what you know, and you tell them, hey, this is where it is. Honestly, write me a check and walk away.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds greedy because you've been taught that that's a greedy line and that's a greedy, but it's not really. It's write a check and walk away, because if you had to go through the motions, the ups and the downs, and half the time you keep it a secret of all the mess ups and the improprieties, even if we're not fully formed, we deserve the right to get there, to journey there with the same resources that you got there with. God knows how much money you've wasted while you're talking about this one black pastor that walked away with $10,000 from a church or something. God knows the millions of dollars that have slipped through your fingers. As I said to one church member of mine, don't be so impressed with what you see some of our mega ministries doing, because they might spend more on one HD camera in their church than they spend on all this community outreach you're impressed with.
That's right.
Meanwhile, we as a marginalized community here in Warren, you know what I'm talking about. If I'm talking in Warren, I told a white peer of mine, you're working with East Market money, I'm working with 4th Street money.
Absolutely.
My ties come from old retired black women and people who might be younger trying to be faithful, but they don't have the jobs. You've got the funds of business owners and old money, trust funds, people turning over parts of their wills to the church over generations upon generations upon generations, while we still, whether you like it or not, are actually at a lower position because of the hundreds of years of wage loss and wage theft that has occurred that never gave us the chance to have 300-year-old trust funds and legacy. So don't look down on what we're not able to do. Ask yourself, why are we not able to do it? And why do you keep coming back to the same community doing the same thing and no change actually happens there when you get done with your giveaway and your bikes and your presents? Why? I asked that same pastor, if you've been doing turkeys in this neighborhood every single year, why do you have to keep coming back? Right. Maybe we don't need turkeys. Maybe we need turkey farms. Maybe we need, jobs and development and advocacy that only your voice could give us. But let me share the vision. You don't get to decide for us what we need, but you can support what we need. That's it. Do you think there's an inherent responsibility that God places on the church?
Without a doubt. We have to
he said, I saw that look.
We have to ask the question, what does it mean to follow the one who emptied himself?
Right.
I mean, you know what I found? Folks want to do everything except lose.
Wow.
They want to do everything except separate, detach, become less, decrease. But really, when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, you want to make this world, if you want to set the wrongs right, and you want to be a reparative force in the world, how do you think that's going to happen?
Right.
Without redistributing tension, wealth, you name it. Let's go down the list. I mean, power, everything. So what we always see is just tokenism. Time after time after time after time. It's just tokenism. It's the appearance. But nobody really wants to let go of anything.
Yeah. I've run into it so many times, and Pastor Jeff, you've been here. Even when I talk to peers who are from another context, cultural context, the dominant culture, and we talk about the uncomfortable things, the discomforts, some of them will say, well, I don't want to come and worship or be in a space because I'll feel strange. I'll feel that. I'm like, welcome to my world. Maybe you would actually understand and empathize fully if you were the person that, when a joke is made, and people do wrongs don't make it right. Well, you sit there and take this joke. You know what I'm saying? I mean, people, we have ways, cultural things, inside jokes, whatever you want to call it, that kind of go with being a part of a community and people. And what many in the dominant culture don't understand is they have the privilege of avoiding that at their leisure. They don't have to be around my culture, but I must function within their culture. I must. I can't even do ministry. Dr. Willie Francois from New Jersey, who really recently wrote a book about almost along the same lines. He said that you can't get up. We were in New Orleans for a convention, said you can't get up and be Martin Luther King in the pulpit for your sermon while Billy Graham is teaching your Sunday school.
Right.
Wow. Most of our Sunday school material is strictly evangelical. strictly. The evangelical and the gospel message, and that's fine. He says, but you can't just include justice in your sermonizing. Justice has to be a part of your teaching.
That's good.
It actually has to be a part of your curriculum, and it's not. So the people are being fed that hour Sunday school or those Bible studies off of Lifeway and basically Southern Baptist curriculum or Assemblies of God curriculum, which is fine. It has, but it doesn't speak to the culture that we're getting up and preaching on and hammering, and this ain't right and that ain't right. And they're actually saying, well, my book didn't say anything about that. All it said was love Jesus, love people, and you go to heaven. Right. It doesn't talk about what it looks like in practicality that we tend to preach on. And so we do have some questions, and we're grateful that we have one. I want you to type in your questions for Pastor Robles. He has been given some wonderful nuggets. Jeff, pick a good one. Absolutely. He has a great question. Brother Scott has, what does sincerity look like? And would your suspicion let you know it when you see it? That's a good one. What does sincerity look like? And would your suspicion let you know it when you see it?
You want me to field that one?
I'll just answer as a Black man who is very passionate about justice. Are you willing to deal with the tension of my suspicions and stick around for a while until I decide you're really sincere? Are you willing to stick around long enough? Or, and I'm not saying this to you, Scott, in general. I'm saying that that's a sentiment I'm sure other people share. Like, hey, I'm trying to help. I really am real, but you keep putting the wall up. You keep putting the barrier up. Well, just like a person that's been abused, there's a reason for that.
It's that cry wolf. It's that cry wolf
like
mentality.
Crying wolf, or you're always gonna be offended by something.
It's not us. It's their cry wolf, because there's been so many people who said they're sincere, but at the end of the day, their motives have been wrong or been off.
Right.
And so, you know,
do we have a right to be suspicious?
Yeah, that's what. So now our guard is really up.
Yeah, you do. Right. To tell you, Scott, and I'll let Pastor Robles jump on this. To have as many potential white allies that have fallen through over the years, I cannot help but be suspicious. It just comes with the territory for me, and I hope the Holy Spirit will reveal to me that, yeah, this person is this, but there's no guarantee it'll happen the first day.
Right.
So, Pastor Robles, jump on this.
I'm just going to echo. I think sincerity lets suspicion have its place and doesn't seek to dissolve it. It recognizes the realities that have created the suspicion instead of denying it. And so that's the first thing. You have to let suspicion have its place and be willing to sit in the tension of it all. With patience and listening and trying your best to understand. And then, you know, the last thing sincerity is, it's not words. Sincerity shows up and does.
Right. I'm glad you said that, because one challenge I made, and we've had one friend, I could say one friend, Jeff and I both know him, we've had him on the show, Pastor Holbrook. And I'm saying him because I have said those exact words, Pastor Robles, to several people. And I say this not, again, I know people might take it in a certain way, but I am probably one of the more prominent figures in our city just in this little time right now among Black pastors. And there have been times when I've said to people, well, what's stopping you from just coming down the street once in a while? Right. What's stopping you from, when we're doing something, just coming and being present? And I know you're not looking for acknowledgement, but you probably will be acknowledged. You know, we're just glad you're here. But what's stopping you from normalizing your presence with us? What's stopping you? As what did we used to joke about? You would go 5,000 miles away to do missions work for months at a time, but won't go 5 miles down the street to go into a marginal and spend time there. Join a Black church or a marginalized community church as a mission of unity and integration, you know, intentionally, with purpose. I'm going to spend 2 years at this church, and I might not be no more than a Sunday school teacher when it's all said and done. I'm not even looking for anything but to listen, learn, experience, immerse myself. And I'm talking to people that would gladly adapt and learn the language, the culture, the traditions of some faraway land so that they might go take Jesus to them, but will not come and sit under our slang and our preaching style and a little pew walking and old, you know, Negro spirituals, to again broaden, like you said, that tension. Let's ask some more questions. If you have any questions for Pastor Jon Paul Robles, he's been dropping nuggets. As your questions are coming, I hope you have some questions coming. I do want to ask a question. we're talking about a different world. And even within the 5-6 years, we've seen massive shifts, even more than before. And I didn't think, me being a pretty aware person, I knew about the religious right. And, I knew about those movements in the 70s and 80s as a kid. Because again, my church was kind of based on that, even though it was a Black church. My parents carried those concerns. I mean, everybody was trying to turn you gay. Coupon cards were a mark of the beast. Gay day at Disney means you have to boycott Disney. I was raised on some of that. But it's taken like a market shift into like dominionism, ultra dominionism, like we got to take over the marketplace. We have to dominate school boards, obviously the backlash against so-called wokeism, CRT. It literally is a different world now. Like I didn't think it could get any more than the couple cultural things we thought that what we would call that conservative fundamentalist evangelical bent of political, power and persuasion. We thought literally just abortion, gay marriage. Now it's turned into how we teach our kids. It's turned into economic policy. Right. It's turned into vaccine and healthcare. I mean, all these things. How do you see that? And where do you see this going at a large scale? Do you think this is going to cause an even broader splintering, or would there be some place where people start to meet and have real discussion?
One of the things that I'm always drawn to is the parable Jesus gave about the wheat and the tares, and how both are going to continue to grow. We like to, I don't know how, but sometimes we believe in this vision of progress where we think if we progress enough, that evil and the bending of wickedness and all these things is going to go away. And we thought that was going to happen with things like racism. But what we found is it morphed, didn't it? It evolved, it shifted, it went through an evolutionary process because we never really sought to get at the heart of it, which is that vision of maturity cloaked in particularities. When we talk about whiteness, and I say this all the time, when we dismantle whiteness, when we talk about dismantling whiteness, what we mean by that, people immediately, they hear it as hate speech if they're white, and they think, oh, you're talking about me. But when you talk about whiteness, you're talking about something that's not essentialized around color. It's the lasting legacy of colonialism, and it's the way that white people, their customs, their cultures, their beliefs operate as a standard by which all other groups are compared. And it creates a dominant social mechanism that gives advantages to some and disadvantages to others. And so I like the quote by Toni Morrison. She said, this is the greatest example, I think, of whiteness. She said, in America, to be an American means to be white. Everybody else has to hyphenate. So I think what we didn't do in the church, I'm going back to the church now, is we didn't do that kind of work. We didn't look deep enough. We tried to deal with it on a superficial level. So now what do you see? The rise of white evangelical, religious nationalism.
Yes.
We were talking about it earlier. We're starting to see new forms, new shapes of the bending. And it's taking on some really wild, bad theology, bad philosophy. Help me. Get me back to the center of the question, because I feel like I wondered.
Well, no, you're on it. But I mean, it's become what some people have described, and I've seen some Twitter commenters talk about the opposite, where, I mean, Jesus said, my kingdom's not of this world. You don't express the power of God through the power of the gun, through the power of government, but that's literally become the MO of this effort is, put our people in place, put our policies, legislate morality and spirituality to extremes, which was ironic because it wasn't just a few years ago that if we talked too much about racism and laws that need to be passed, they would tell us, you can't legislate morality. You can't legislate racism out of people. You can't legislate prejudice out of people. So you're not supposed to pursue it that way. It should happen within the confines of the church and reconciliation, while simultaneously they are trying to legislate their morals and beliefs and doctrinal positions into, codifying their beliefs, which, by the way, are not even broadly representative of all Christian faiths. And half of the Bible and even the Jewish traditions they quote don't even speak to the things. They have taken some of the scriptures, as I talked about the Jeremiah text about abortion. That's why Jeremiah 1:6, I knew you. And I'm like, read that again. Before the world was framed, like before you were, not the world was framed, before you were born in the womb. So that's not some conception positivity, text. It's a text about God's foreknowledge and eternal wisdom that is far beyond anybody's lifespan or existence, and before they even come into the world. But to hear an evangelical or fundamentalist tell it, that is proof positive that the very act or presence or availability of any abortive act is evil, even though there are other texts that splinter it a lot more. And America is not a nation of nuance. That's one of the biggest things. America is not a nation of nuance, and our religion is like hatchet instead of scalpel. Yeah. And that's how we have worked this. We have to beat, thank you for saying, a relic of colonialism, beat our values into people. Our values, our religion are a blunt force object. Yeah. Wow, that's whereas the teachings of Jesus, even the writings of Paul, is problematic as they might be for some people, they actually force you to consider things. Yeah. Think on these things. Use your intelligence. Yeah. Suppose, and then he lays out a scenario. Suppose a man, ABC. We're not doing that. We're like, that's evil. Make it illegal. Blah, blah, blah. God is pleased. Yeah. It's like blunt force witnessing, blunt force evangelism.
So Pastor Jon, how you talked about dismantling whiteness? Is that what you called it? Yeah. Dismantling what? So, I mean, how do we really do that when, even what Pastor Todd was talking about, when it's almost like, how do you dismantle when somebody feels that they're always right? I mean, we have this concept where, they basically said defund the FBI. But when we said defund the police, right? You know what I mean? So, how do you dismantle somebody who, when they make something up or when they suggest that what they're saying is right, it just becomes that. It becomes right. Yeah. So how do we sit down with a group of people in a group of room or a coliseum and say, listen, what you've been thinking and how you think is wrong, period?
You have to challenge your aesthetic sensibilities. You have to immerse yourself in cadences and cultures that are not your own. Not to center yourself, not to ambitiously rise to some position where people recognize you, but to humble yourself and listen and be compassionate in terms of the space that you're in. Just be there, but be a loving presence, a presence that is there to pay attention. It's the rarest form of generosity. That's the moment. Just pay attention. I love that. So like if you immerse yourself in these waters, if you will, that challenge your aesthetic sensibilities. I was joking around with there's a lot of social workers and professionals at that event that you were talking about on Friday. And I said, I'm going to cuss here. So if this is going to offend you, you should mute your speakers.
That's the way, Doc.
I said, learn to clap on the 2 and 4, damn it. Right. And of course, like, yes, people who understood it, got it. But half the room was like, what does that even mean? Right. Because there has been no immersion in anything other than the dominant normative for them. So you have to travel. What do they say? Like the fastest way to an open mind is travel. You have to travel. There's no other way around it, or else you'll just keep that vision of maturity centered in your life and you can't think outside of that. So you do really need to immerse yourself in places where you are necessarily a guest and just be quiet.
I love it because I'm tired of Family Feud praise breaks. I'm tired of these cornball shouts. Give it to me on the 2 and the 5, the 4. No, I mean, I appreciate it, Pastor Robles, and I think that you're spot on. I mean, I think that we are headed in a dangerous place because we are repeating mistakes of the past, trying to use religion and nationalism and national pride as blunt force objects to force our ways upon upon others. And the funny thing is, Scott made a good point that evangelicals and fundamentals are not the only forces using legislation. The culture has moved fronts. I agree with you, but I would challenge that, Scott, and we do have challenging comments back and forth. As followers of Christ, we're the ones who aren't supposed to be. we might be able to say, and I get tired of hearing evangelical. I'm not saying you, Scott, but I get tired of hearing Christians say, well, the other guys are doing it, so we have to push back. Jesus literally said the opposite. He said the kingdom of God suffers violence. And I don't know why people read that backwards all the time, as if we're supposed to be the forceful people. He's literally saying that we will be subject to the forces of other agendas, and the violent will do so by force. But people who carry that character, the people who see that as the solution, will met that punishment against us and the values and the ethics of love that we stand on. He never said, now get your lick back. He never said, now you make sure you get your folk in place. And that's the problem I have, is that we keep saying, well, they're doing this, so we need to push back. And Jesus is saying, no, you need to push it a whole different direction. My kingdom is not of this world. Either my kingdom's not of this world, or you've made this world your kingdom, but it can't be both. It can't be both. And I think we're trying to make it both. We're trying to make Jesus's kingdom come by making our kingdom, our nation, look something like his kingdom. And that's impossible. And we're like, what? That ethic doesn't even make sense. If it could be done, it would have been done. How many so-called Christian-based nations and empires, and not to mention other religions that we may not believe in or affirm, but they also believe they had the solution through their own fundamental beliefs, that this would create the utopian society of goodness and love, and they are all failures. Every last one of them are failures since the time of Constantine. So I just wish we wouldn't say, well, if the left is doing it, the right needs to do it. If the sinners are doing it, the saints need to do it. To me, what a low bar. What a low bar to live by, instead of looking further and beyond the menial tactics of a temporal world that will not last. That's the thing that's bothersome to me, is the woke crowd is out there, so the saints need to. No, you kind of don't. Well, how weak is your faith? How brittle and fragile are your values that you need a secular document to affirm it and force other people to live by it? That's a scary thought, but I understand it, because, as you said, nobody wants to lose. And they don't see it that way, but nobody wants to give up power. And it's funny, because as much as we fantasize about the early church and Disneyfy it, nobody wants to live under the realities that created the power of the early church, which was persecution, being the outcast, being the marginalized community, interdependent community. Nobody wants to be that, because we've enjoyed these realities for too long.
That's right. And we forget that the prophetic speaks from the margins to the center. It doesn't dominate the center. It speaks from the margins to it. So another way of putting it would be, we overcome evil with good, not by a stronger sense of power or a stronger sense of force, but we overcome it with something other. So Simone Weil, who's a philosopher that I really am invested in, and she was wild. She was a mystic. She was strange, very odd. But one of the things that she says is, justice is the refugee from the camp of conquerors. Which, that the minute you think you're going to be the one, the idea has always been, let's get the bad people out so we can get in there and dominate and control in right ways. Well, maybe the whole process of our faith is there so that we challenge the idea of dominating in general. Right.
Yes. Dominating and dominion. And Scott followed up by saying, neither side will live and let live. And again, I balk at comparing my side, the side of Christ, to the side of the world. I balk at saying, well, if they won't stop, I won't stop. I can choose to stop. I can choose to say, I know that's the way of the world. I know that's the way that the forces are going. If let's say I was, which I am actually in many ways, more of a middle ground. I actually have a lot of conservative values. I just don't feel the need to express them or find some mechanism to enforce them. I actually do agree with many. I value life. I want as many babies as possible to live. I believe in personal. I even believe in traditional marriage. I believe in all those things. But the fact of the matter is, if there are people who are against that, and I'm the one following the ethic of Christ, then I'm not going to join their tactics to make sure that my values keep up with their quest for power. The world is supposed to lust after power. Believers are not.
That's right.
So we keep saying, well, they're doing it to gain power, so let them.
Yeah.
That was literally Jesus' answer. Jesus' answer was, if they want power, let them have it.
Yeah.
If that's what they want.
Rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, but it shall not be so with you. Right? So that's what they do. They lord it over, but it shouldn't be that way with us.
Right. And if, again, that's what exposes, again, whether you intend for it or not, definitely not ascribing any nefarious purposes to anybody, but there can be a subconscious desire to maintain and hold on to what you've always had because it's all you've known. And the sad thing is we have such a short memory, and that's also why history is important, because the vast majority of the journey of God's people is not in the context that we are familiar with in the Western world's domination of the Christians killing the infidels and this, that, and the other. And we're basically doing the same thing, just nicer. Yeah. It's basically the same thing. It's basically the same conquest. It's the same stuff. Crusades. It's just legislative now. It's just, so we're such when I went to the Holy Land, one of the most dynamic quotes that the guide ever gave us is said that you are like babies to us. Your history is so short. Your memories are so short. You can reach in the ground and touch thousands of years of antiquity just by touching the dirt here. Everywhere you look. Wow. Just an inch into the ground. He said, I can show you a tree. It was like a little pile of ash on the road that led up to the pool at Siloam, whatever it was called. And it was like an underground road, the original road. Just a piece of ash was a tree that existed there thousands of years ago. You could just see the markings on the ground. So we're so young in our perspectives, but our perspectives are all we know. Wow. And that's the context that they're speaking out of, the myth of the Christian nation. Right. Yeah. What makes you Christian? Documents or actions? Because I know if I owned slaves in my backyard and I was raping women, nobody would say, at least he's talking about God on Sundays. At least he's sending $1 million to Africa for missions. Nobody would say that. They would say that's an evil man. Right. Yeah. And either the ethics of sin and holiness are consistent and constant according to the word, or they're not. So we don't sit here and say, well, that was a different day and time. Yeah. So I mean, I'm grateful for the wonderful perspective that you brought, Pastor Robles. And I mean, you're definitely you're an invite backer. We don't do it all the time, but absolutely.
Well, I appreciate you having me and letting me join in, and I just really am thankful to be here tonight. So, and I think the world of you both. So thanks for letting me hang out.
I love it.
We didn't even get to talk about your music, man. We got to get you back.
We're gonna do some music videos, some production. All right. You do graphic design and everything, don't you?
Yeah, my wife actually was the one who went to film school. I studied recording arts back in the day, a long time ago. But I love music. I've always loved music, and I found friends in music around here. So, it's always been center in my life, and got to work with some friends. And
you done some work for Red Hands?
Red Hands, yeah.
Yeah, we had them in Warren a while back. They're my kids' favorite group.
They were one of them was on the show, right?
Yeah, we had Kyrie on the show.
Yeah, shout out to Kyrie and Al Parker.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being with us. Everybody, give it up for Pastor Jon Paul Robles. I mean, he is the man. I think we're gonna have to bring him in at some point. You might have to speak at one of our events. I mean, he definitely brings a fire, and we appreciate it. So thank you so much. We're gonna take you to the back for just a minute, and stay on for a second if you have time.
Do you have anything to say, Mike?
Yeah, anything else you want to say, Big Mike? All right. Thank you so much. Hey, everybody, give it up again for Pastor Robles. And as we're going, we want to thank our sponsors again. Thank you all for watching, and encourage you to follow, like, share. Check us out on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. But I'd like to take a quick moment of tribute, if you don't mind.
Oh my God, please,
Pastor Jeff. I want to take a quick moment of tribute, because when we walked into the studio tonight, we walked in with the news that one of our stalwart ministers of the gospel, pastors, shepherds, mentors, and friends has passed away here in the Mahoning Valley in the city of Warren.
Yeah.
And that is in the person of Superintendent Dr. Gerald L. Morgan of the Hoyt Street Flourishing Ministries Church of God in Christ. And I have a personal experience with Dr. Morgan and with the Hoyt Street family. They were and have been a wonderful part of my formation and connection in ministry work. He was one of the earliest pastors to give me the opportunity to preach in his pulpit when I was just a young man. I don't think I was more than 21 or 22, maybe. And he asked me I got a chance to preach a revival service. The Hoyt Street Flourishing Ministries were a part of a fellowship of what we call the Sons of Thunder. And those of you who know what I'm talking about, with Pastor Evans and Pastor Johnny Austin, Johnny's father, and then it was Pastor and now Bishop Nick Myers, and they called themselves the Sons of Thunder. And there were a few others. And those fellowships were just so sweet and formative.
I just love guys. I mean, he was old school.
Sweet.
When I first came up to Warren, I went there and, I was pastor at the time. Let me know I'm a pastor. You gonna preach today?
Right. You gonna preach.
You gonna preach today?
He was
I'm like,
put you on the spot. Yeah. You got to work.
I ain't think people done that no more.
Yeah. He was calling you
one of them. He was one of them.
You want to talk about a genuine, kind-hearted, hardworking, down to earth. I mean, great sense of humor. If you knew anything about his pastor, Pastor Nolan Brown, Superintendent Nolan Brown, he had a wicked sense of humor too. He was just that guy. I know y'all know the nickname. Y'all all know the nickname. Hey, it's all love. Maintain. Hey, and I say that because that's what my dad would say, because they came up together. Mm-hmm. And my dad once said that they looked out for each other even when they were out in the world, before they got saved, when they were young men, kind of doing their thing like young men do. And they looked out for each other while they were in the world. So our prayers are to Lady Dr. Vivian Morgan, the children, the Hoyt Street Church. I can't imagine how deep the pain runs. I went through a death of a pastor when I was 11 years old, and it forever changed me. And it's a hard thing for a pastor to pass, because there are more than one family that's suffering. And it's all one big family. So we're standing with you. We're praying for you. That's all jokes aside and all the controversial content. We love you all. Anything we can do to help, we'll definitely be there for you. So much love to the Morgan family, the Hoyt Street family. Yes. To everybody watching, pray for each other. We don't get sentimental a whole lot, but think about each other, lift each other up. And I believe God will take care of all of us. So until next time, God bless you. See you next week for Sunday night service.